Welcome to this special Q&A all about GarageBand where we, and I say we, are answering all your questions about GarageBand because I'm joined today by that guy, Patrick from the GarageBand Guide. How are you today, Patrick?
Oh, I'm great, Pete. Thank you. How are you, mate?
I'm doing exceptionally well. Now, for the 3% of people watching here who don't know who you are and what you do, why don't you give us the 10-second breakdown version of what the GarageBand Guide is all about?
10 seconds. So yeah, it's all about teaching beginners and intermediate people who are using GarageBand even how to use the program on Mac and on iOS/iPadOS. Trying to make it as straightforward as possible, binning all that technical nonsense and just making it so that you can get on with creating awesome music.
That is, I reckon that was exactly 10 seconds. It's almost like you've said that a few times in the last decade.
Once or twice.
So yes, if you haven't, if you're not aware of Patrick's YouTube channel and amazing website, there is a link to his YouTube channel down below. You've just hit 50,000 subscribers on that channel, which is actually phenomenal. So congratulations on that. And I was going to make a joke like this, and I'm going to try it, which is Patrick literally wrote the book on GarageBand because you've just released an ebook about getting started with GarageBand. But I wouldn't make a joke that lame, so I decided not to. I just did. So yes, check out the link down below. You can check all of the good stuff over there for GarageBand Guide. Now, the format of this show is super simple. We want to dive into your questions. We're about to jump in and answer some GarageBand related questions. If you have, I've got some that I've actually gathered from various sources over the last week. If you're here live, just put question or something that's going to catch our attention in the chat so that we can make sure that we capture your question. And there may be a rant or two at various stages as we go through. I know, who would have thunk it?
One or two if you're lucky.
One or two if you're lucky. If you've watched any of our content, you know we love a good rant. We love talking about random topics. So it may be about 50% GarageBand, 50% ranting on various home recording topics. Now I'm going to start off with a question that's actually one of my questions, and I get asked this from various folks that are starting out. And since you've just released your ebook about GarageBand iOS, obviously you've done a heap of videos on GarageBand Mac. What do you think is the main difference if someone's about to start out and they're like, oh, do I go Mac, do I go iOS? What would be your sort of feedback or your views, or what are the biggest differences that you tell folks when they're starting out?
I think so. If a couple of years ago, if somebody was to ask me which platform to go for when they were starting out, I would definitely have said get a secondhand Mac, stick GarageBand on it, and start recording music. Now, I would maybe be more inclined to say grab yourself an entry-level or second-hand iPad, stick GarageBand on it, and start recording your music. They're both really accessible. I think GarageBand on Mac, there's a definite kind of progression there, intentional on Tim Apple's part, I think, to kind of get you through learning how to use GarageBand and then into Logic when you hit a point where you want to kind of go a bit further where the program doesn't quite cater for. Whereas I think GarageBand for iOS/iPadOS now, I guess, is very much its own thing. So really, I think the question or the answer to that question, as it tends to be in these situations, is it depends really on what you're looking to do, like things like budget, and if you plan to kind of get to grips with music production with a simple dot and then move on to something better, or whether you just better, I shouldn't say better, something more advanced, shall we say, or whether you just want to grab something, record your music, and then get it out there, That doesn't really answer your question, does it?
No, well, it does, and that's the thing. I think you'll realize that there is no yes, no, right, wrong answer. I think here's rant number one. I think a lot of the time when people are talking about home recording, they talk in definitives. So they talk in yes, no, right, wrong, do, don't, as opposed to the end goal is creating music. You sort of said at the start you want to help folks create music, and that's exactly what I do on this channel. It's what you do on GarageBand Guide. So however you do that is however you do that. So you don't need to have X hardware and X software and do things a certain way. There's different workflows that work better for different people. So if someone comes to me and says, hey, I use Logic or I use Nuendo or I use Pro Tools, convince me why I should use GarageBand, I'll say you probably shouldn't. You probably shouldn't spend your time learning a new piece of software if you're already comfortable in getting the results you want in the bit of software that you're already using. And it's the same as other people like, oh, I'm starting out here and now I want to switch to something else. Well, yeah, if you want to, if the thing you're using isn't delivering, so if you're using GarageBand, you're like, I I'd really love some extra controls. I'd really love to be able to use these features that are in Logic. Well, then move to Logic. If you're getting what you want out of GarageBand, then I think you should stay in GarageBand, because then you can watch all of our videos.
I kind of always said this, that GarageBand is very much for musicians who want to record their own music, I find, whereas more things like Pro Tools and to a certain extent Logic are for people who want to produce music.
Yes.
That's kind of the difference. I think everything's in there in GarageBand on Mac and on iOS for you to just plug in, record, mix, and then get it out there. Whereas you've got a few more steps. Obviously, they're useful steps, but a few more steps than some of these more advanced pro programs, So.
Absolutely agree, and it's a good segue. I don't know if it's a good segue, but it is, because I've got my next question here, which has come from the Pure Steve on YouTube. So I'm currently recording vocals for my tracks with an earbud mic, and this is something that I do quite often, especially in iOS. I'm mostly in an area with a lot of background noise. How can I reduce that in pre or post? So, what are your noise? Obviously, people are recording in different places. Might be in an apartment, in a bedroom, studio with family, clattering around the house. What's your tips on reducing noise when you're recording or mixing?
Sound quality or noise. For background noise, I think you can use stuff like blankets and stuff to try and kind of deaden the sound around where you're recording. It's difficult or different if you're using a headphone mic. I wouldn't generally recommend that anyway. I would probably say even the microphone built into your device is probably going to be better than the little headphone mic, I think.
Yep.
But yeah, so like if you want to reduce noise, try and deaden the area around where you're recording. Like get in a cupboard. I'm in a cupboard right now. But get in your closet, in your cupboard, where you're not going to have a big room for sound to reflect off of to begin with. But probably don't record using a headset mic, I would say.
Yeah, and it's a good point.
What the kind of the equipment you've got, I guess, but I just wouldn't recommend that, really.
Yeah,
what do you think?
No, I agree, and I mean, I think the microphones actually on your devices are getting better and better. So if you've got a more modern iPhone or an iPad, then that is actually going to be probably a better mic than any of your headset mics. The headset mics can tend to be very tinny, so they'll work for spoken word. I've used them for background vocals and things like that. If you're recording a nice lead vocal that you want a bit of depth into, then you'll probably need to use some EQing to get it a little bit less tinny sounding. But yeah, so Dan Baker, one of our counterparts, produces some great songs in GarageBand. He recorded the violin part for one of my songs just using the built-in mic, and it sounds fabulous. So
you would never believe it. A lot of his videos, when he sings into it, you would never believe that it's a built-in mic on his iPad. It's unreal.
100%, and it shows what a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of EQing, a little bit of post-processing. So yeah, I think in terms of answering the question, as Patrick said, find yourself a small space without reflective surfaces. Use blankets, use coats, soft furnishings, whatever you can to remove a lot of that background noise, to go to the quietest place in your house. And I guess that is score one for mobile, and you can do the same on a laptop, but as opposed to a desktop recording solution where you are stuck in your environment unless you've got a really long cable and you can go somewhere else, whereas you can actually take your mobile devices with you to wherever you go and find the quietest room, or go to your car. I've actually been speaking to someone who recorded an entire song in their car because it's the quietest place in their house, happened to be their car. Now there's other weird acoustics and dynamics that might go on in there you need to work out, as well as the factor of the police driving past and seeing you singing into a phone in your car. But if you're happy to work past those, then you'll be just fine. I want to give a shout out to the folks that we have here live. So we've got a bunch of people here. We've got Metallion 858, we've got Goran Larson, Amaracia, Jade Star, Gary Knight, Shazam, the iPad producer. Love your channel, my friend. We've got Neva Kundes here, a bunch of folks that I'm missing, Jan de Blues, and a bunch of other folks. Now, if you do have questions and you are here live, get our attention by putting a bunch of big Qs or something in the chat, and that way we'll make sure that we answer your question. Or to put it more accurately, I'll make sure I make Patrick answer all the really hard questions. And if it's a really easy low ball, I'll grab that one and run with it. So we'll go with that. So speaking of challenging questions that I know nothing about, let's throw this one at you. Tell me about how to map the enormous Logic Loop and MIDI sampled instrument libraries to GarageBand. This one comes from Colerin Verheer on YouTube. So this is definitely for you, because the short answer for iOS is you can't. MIDI is very simple with iOS, you can send one channel of MIDI in to one instrument and record it at one time. So over to you, Patrick, to explain this concept.
So I think what he's asking, or because I saw this question earlier, I thought what he was asking was how to get all the loops and sounds from Logic and use them in GarageBand. That's what I got from it.
Yep.
If you would have to obviously have Logic as well as GarageBand installed on your Mac, and it's just a case of re-indexing your loops. There's a drop-down menu in GarageBand's loop browser. You can scroll to the bottom and re-index your loops, and it takes GarageBand and MainStage and Logic all share the same sound folders on your Mac, so it will draw all of that extra content into GarageBand. And then the same goes for your instruments. There is a tab that you can click in the GarageBand menu in the top left of your screen when GarageBand's open, and choose to reinstall all sounds. So you have an option to install essential sounds or an option to reinstall all sounds. And if you reinstall all sounds, it pulls all of those instruments from Logic and MainStage, if you've got MainStage, and you can use them inside GarageBand itself. That's how I would do it. Not great to try and explain it without showing you on video. But yeah, I mean, future video idea, definitely. But yeah, that's how I would do that, to use those sounds in GarageBand.
Gotcha. So, and you've probably interpreted the question much better than I did, but yeah, and I guess maybe not. Who knows? We can only try. But yes, in iOS, along those same lines, and I guess it's a frustrating thing, because the question that I get asked a lot is, I've just bought a Loop Masters pack, and it's got like 300 WAV files in it. How do I import those into GarageBand? And the answer in iOS is add them one at a time, because there's no indexing function. There's no way to push things off. You can put things in your GarageBand transfer folder, and that's the easiest way to probably do, to transfer it in the Files app, put it in your GarageBand file transfer folder, and then from there you can import those into whatever song you're using. But yeah, there's not a lot of love for bulk anything in iOS at the moment.
Yeah.
So
I remember back in the day, you used to have to go through iTunes to import WAV files and stuff into GarageBand for iOS. It's, it could be worse. But yeah, that is definitely a missing feature they should probably add at some point.
Yes, exactly. It could definitely be a lot worse. We've got a couple of comments here from folks. Nirvana is awesome. So yes, checking out your poster behind you there, Patrick. You got Alice in Chains there too. So it's pretty clear that we're a couple of old 90s dudes that we're talking here today. So you'll take everything coming from that. We've got a question from Darren Anderson, which is, do either of you guys release CDs? So what about you releasing music and CDs and that sort of thing, Patrick? What's your experience been in that realm?
I haven't been on a CD since about 2002 with my old band. But I don't know, it's worth doing, I think, in maybe small numbers, to kind of, if you're doing shows or something, it's quite a good thing to have some form of merch that you can sell and stuff there. But I think in terms of a general release, probably not. I certainly haven't. I don't know if I'd recommend it unless you've got some kind of, audience for physical media, if they kind of want that kind of thing. But yeah, it's all about streaming. Certainly at this level, the kind of do-it-yourself side of things, definitely I would say streaming is the way to go, as opposed to releasing a CD.
Yeah, I think I've produced one CD in the last 10 years, and it was literally a burnt copy that I did for my parents so that they could play my music in the car.
Yeah.
That was about it. So yeah, I think if you've got a reason for it, then absolutely. And if you're talking about just releasing music, then yes, I think both of us have done recent videos about how to release. You've used a couple of different services, DistroKid and others, and I'm pretty sure if you search either of our channels and put release music on there, you'll probably get a plethora of videos to watch and spend your day doing. Question from another Darren, from Darren Mitchell. How do you set up the bias guitar effects? Now, I have never used bias. I actually use the Stark amp sim by Clevgrand. I find that one's my favorite amp sim, and that is a Audio Unit version 3 plugin for iOS, which means all you need to do is install the app and then go into your track and select it and play it. It's as simple as that. So do you have any experience with bias or any other guitar effects that you've tried out? You want to provide some?
Yeah. I've got the bias effects. There's a second version out now. I've only got bias effects 1 on the Mac. I've got it on iPad as well. It's great. In terms of setting up, I know it's such a snobby thing, but I tend to just use the presets. They've got there's is it Tone Cloud? I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a cloud service where you can upload your own presets. But if you have the app or the program, you can go in and search through other people's presets that they've uploaded, and there are thousands. You would never need to dial in a tone ever again. So, I mean, that's generally all I've kind of used it for, is stealing other people's hard work in the form of the tones they've created and used them in my own tracks. Yeah, I've done a huge amount of tweaking when it's come to creating my own tone within it.
And I think I'm actually amazed by a lot of folks, and actually quite impressed that some people, and sometimes I'm critical of this, because sometimes I think you can get into the mindset of spending more time trying to find this awesome killer tone than actually recording a song. But I actually love the people that do it, because if their desire and their passion is actually just building these tones, then folks like you and me can just jump in on that, download their tones and use them in our tracks. So I think everybody wins when you've got these people that love to hack around and find ways to do things as well.
There are tons of videos. So, I mean, obviously, the answer to all these questions is search YouTube. There's loads of No Bias have their own videos on how to kind of dial in your own tone, but loads of people use bias effects. And there's tons of great videos if you search on YouTube of how to actually achieve really good tone using it. So.
Excellent. Love it. Let's move on to our next question from someone whose channel I do like, and you should definitely be subscribed to, Shazam, the iPad producer. Pete, can you explain to those how you can export an iOS project into the desktop version or Logic? I get that question a lot, and I'll probably defer this one as well, because I don't use GarageBand or Logic on the desktop version. I have, however, spoken to folks who have been using both. So over on the GarageBand users Facebook group, shout out to you folks there. We obviously have folks using both iOS and Mac. And I think the short version of this, and correct me if you've had different experiences, that iOS to Mac works pretty well most of the time. Mac to iOS works never, none of the time. Has that been your experience too, or what you've come across?
No, it works, but when you go from Mac to iOS, it just exports whatever you're working with in Mac into one single file into iOS. So it doesn't kind of export as a multi-track project inside iOS. It's just a single track mixed down version of it that you can add stuff to, and then when you then export that from iOS back into macOS, anything you've added is added to your multi-track project.
Got it.
As far as I'm aware, I've not done it for a while, but that's certainly the way.
I've not either, and in fact, we've talked about this, and this may be the impetus for this. I think we need a collaboration, Patrick, where I record in iOS, I send it to you, you add some tracks in Mac and send it back, and I think that might add value, because I know I get this question a lot, and obviously Shazam is as well, which is, hey, I'm on iPad and I got a friend who's on a Mac. How do we collaborate in the best possible way? And I know that what a lot of folks tend to do is one person owns the master track. This is probably the way I'd recommend, is that one person is the producer, and if you're collaborating, especially with more than two people, one person's the producer, they just send out stereo mix downs to people to add tracks to, and then they send back the individual tracks and put those tracks back into the original. That way you can keep all your original. If you've got virtual instruments, if you've got MIDI tracks and other things, one person is keeping all of them together so that you've got that flexibility to edit it. But then other people that are adding, so you got someone recording guitars, you got someone recording vocals, they can record them to the mixdown version and then just send that one WAV file back to get added back into the original project. I think that's a way that I know Ron and folks over on GarageBand users use that for their collabs, and apparently it works well. So hope that helps some people out. And if you want us to do that collaboration video, then let us know, and we'll get off our asses and do it.
I just quickly jump in here and point out the fact that Jade Starr has just said that she's having curry for breakfast.
let me find that. Here it is.
Disgrace.
Back in bed with my curry breakfast, ready to be educated. Nothing goes better than curry breakfast in bed, and GarageBand content.
Living your best life, Jade. Good work.
And thank you to Jade. He's a great supporter, I know, of both our content and channels, and always providing additional extra information to help folks out. So love having you on board. Here's a question from Jonah Lamont. How can I reduce the amount of storage that my GB projects take up? So storage management. Do you want to give your views on managing storage and size of projects first, and then I'll
show you my Mac desktop. That will probably keep you asking me that question, Pete. You can zip them. You can zip them. So if you're not using them at the time, you can zip them down. Mac has a built-in zipper. compressor so you can compress the file down, or just get an external drive and stick all the projects, all the half-finished projects, I'm sure you probably have as much as I do, on an external project so that you can go back to them when you need to, but they're not taking up space on your actual main hard drive. That's what I do anyway, and it seems to work okay for keeping hard drive volume down.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's really the only solution. So the size is the size. So if you're recording high definition audio, it is whatever you've set your settings at. And I guess the only thing that you could say there is that WAV files, so actual audio recorders, are going to take up a lot more space than MIDI files. So if you're recording virtual instruments, it's going to be a lot smaller.
Yeah, you can also adjust. You can adjust the settings in GarageBand on Mac certainly to only record at 16-bit instead of 24-bit. But don't do that. Just deal with the larger file size and the better sound quality, I would say.
Yes, yes, and you can. And funnily enough, GarageBand iOS defaults to 16-bit, so make sure you are jumping into settings and changing that to 24-bit. If you're using, I've seen people that they're using like a really nice interface. You know, they've got a Steinberg interface and they've got an Audio Technica mic. They've spent like $400 on their kit, and then they're recording at 16-bit. And look, it's not going to sound terrible, but it's not going to sound the best it can. And when we're in the home studio, you want every advantage you can get. Like, you don't need the best gear and you don't need the best quality, but if you can change one setting and you can get 24-bit instead of 16-bit audio quality, which is the bit depth, which is like how much dynamic range you have in that, it's just going to help your song sound much, much better. So good point. Did I answer? Yeah. So no real way except exactly what Patrick said. Use your cloud storage. So upload to Google Drive or Dropbox if you don't have enough physical storage. Get a USB hard drive. And now with iPadOS and iOS 13, we can actually use USB drives, thankfully. So we can actually back up. You can zip up on iOS now too. We've got a zip function. So iOS and iPadOS is catching up with some of this file management stuff. Still not perfect. But yeah, exactly that. Just don't keep a bunch of stuff. And please don't just keep your stuff on one machine or one iPad or one iPhone. Back up, people. Don't come to Patrick or I and say, oh, I've just lost 76 GarageBand projects, because we'll say, where did you back them up? And then you'll say nowhere, and then you'll cry, and then we'll feel bad, and nobody wants any of that.
macOS Catalina. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, do I detect a rant? We might have to... might have to jump into that and explore that.
Ranting about macOS Catalina, come on. Everybody loved that video. Let's not go down that road.
Let's move on, shall we? That's a good reason to segue over. Question from Bubba is, why do most of the MIDI files I import into GarageBand have the volume level grayed out in the mixer and is unmovable? Now, I don't use a lot of MIDI importing, as in importing MIDI. GarageBand iOS only added it about a year ago, and it's very hit and miss. And a lot of weird things happen like this. So yes, sometimes the volume will be grayed out. Sometimes it will put a drum track on a piano track, which sounds really great when it's going do 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 do. So yeah, I think the answer is MIDI files are weird, and GarageBand MIDI support is lacking, at least in iOS. What's your experience on Mac been? Any different?
Exactly the same. Yeah, absolutely. What you can try doing is you can try duplicating the track. So import it, then right click on the track header, and it'll say duplicate track with, or copy track with duplicate settings. Do that, drag and drop the regions you're having issues with into that new track, and that might fix it. That has worked for me in the past, but again, it's a coin toss whether or not this stuff works sometimes, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, if you're just downloading from an internet site and it's just a MIDI file, yeah, sometimes they're put together well and sometimes not so much. But yeah, so same on iOS is if you've got any, and the same with sort of a dead track, like sometimes you'll just get a weird random track that just will not play back, but you can see the notes there, especially if it's a virtual track, you can see the notes there. So do exactly that, duplicate out the track, and in iOS, you need to then copy the actual physical track, the green virtual track, and then paste that down into a new track. And then you might find you have your volume controls, you can change your panning, you can do all your things, because yeah, sometimes it'll import them weirdly. The one thing you can't do, I haven't got a fix for, is that drum and keyboard issue. So sometimes it'll just import a drum track, it'll put in a keyboard track, and you'll say, no, actually these are drums, and it'll say, oh no, these are a keyboard track, and that's what it says, so we cannot change that. So yes, sorry to be the bearer of bad news on that one. This is an interesting one, an interesting question here we have from Naki Zakala. Is it reliable to create a whole EP or album on iPhone 7 with stock plugins but get industry standard quality? Can you produce a song, an EP that's going to be industry quality on your iPhone with just stock plugins. This is more of an opinion piece, so I'm going to throw to you, Patrick, for your opinion on this, and then I'll give my opinion, which won't surprise anyone.
You can, absolutely you can, whether you want to. It will be extra work, extra steps. You'll have to obviously practice to get good at it using the stock plugins that are in GarageBand. But yeah, of course you can, absolutely. Should you? There's quite a lot of good options out there, third-party plugin options for kind of doing the mastering or certainly getting stuff to broadcast volume for you. So Clever can do a great app. Oh, what's the name of it, Pete? You use it all the time. Is it Grand Finale?
Grand Finale by Clever Grand. Yeah, very simple. Very
app for getting your kind of tracks or your finished tracks up to the kind of volume they need to be for streaming services. But yes, you can if you want. Yes.
And agreed. Agreed for me. Even so, the first EP I recorded 3 years ago using just my iPhone 6S, so not even an iPhone 7. I did all on the iPhone 6S with a little help from the iPad Air 2, and I didn't use a whole bunch extra, but what I did do was use Final Touch in that case, so the Positive Grid app on iPad, to actually master the tracks. And all these things don't have to be difficult or complicated. I think Patrick hit it on the head first, where it's you need to practice, you need to get good recordings, and we'll say this for the first time and probably not the last time in this show, but get it right at the source. Get good quality audio going in, because there is no plug-in mixing technique, mastering technique in the world that is going to make a crappy track sound awesome. You need awesome tracks to get awesome mixes and you have to write good songs too. That's probably the other thing to put in there. If it's a terrible song, it could be recorded in $1 million pristine studio and mixed by Chris Lord-Alge, and it's still going to be a crappy song. And you've heard those on the radio if you've turned on the radio anytime lately. So.
Put that on a t-shirt, Pete. I'd buy it. Just all of what you just said. Just
Can you imagine that? People walk up to you, try to read your chest. They're like, I think this is a valid point, but it's taking a really long time. Love it. All right, that's the. I've skipped a whole bunch of questions here, and I can't even find the one that I've put up there to put this one down. Let's continue down here. Here we go. We've got one from Gary Knight. Can you export stems from the Mac version to import to the iOS version? I think we answered that pretty much before. That you said yes. So you can even send the project file, but it will import it as just one mix down. So I guess the solution here would be you'd have to. Is there an export stems option in GarageBand Mac where you can export them as individual tracks, or would you have to do what you do in iOS where you send them one by one?
No, you'd need to silence, mute any tracks you're not using, and then export the singular track, and then go back and export singular like that. I think, there's an export stems option in Logic, I believe, but it's one of the things that isn't available in GarageBand.
One of those things you were talking about at the start. That's those little spicy things that are like, GarageBand's good, but if you get Logic, you can do these additional things. All righty. Derek Smith says you guys should try using Splice to collaborate. I'm not aware of Splice, but perhaps that's an online platform that helps with collaboration. I'm not familiar, but something to actually check out. Absolutely. I'll scroll on down here and see if we have. Hopefully, folks have got other questions and other things here. Nothing at this point in time. So why don't we jump back to my pre-prepared or the questions that people have thrown this way? We'll try and throw Patrick a curveball here, shall we? How about we go with this one? Will I ever be able to time stretch a sample? This comes from Reggie Furlow. And in iOS, the answer is you can't in GarageBand. We don't have stretch time or any way to change a sample except for Apple loops or WAV files that can beat match. What about Mac? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so you've got flex time in Mac you can use to, as long as it's an audio recording sample, and you can't do it with MIDI. Obviously, you can manipulate that in in other ways. But depending on the samples, so if it's just like a vocal sample or something, then you can absolutely use it to a certain extent before it sounds a bit weird, extend it or lessen it. But it would depend on the sample, but you absolutely can. Yes, I have a video on it. Would you believe? Would you believe enough to put it in comments of some description? But yes, you can do that. Yeah.
Excellent. So that is good to know. And look, I'm in the search for an iOS app to do this, because I can't quite believe that there is not one simple app that just says import WAV file and then adjust to X tone or X BPM and then export wave file, because so many people say, I got a drum loop, it's not a stretchable wave, it's 120, I just want it 130 BPM. How hard is that to do? Turns out quite hard in iOS at least. So I believe Logic and Auria Pro, not Logic, Auria Pure Pro and Cubasis may have some more stretching kind of functions. And one of my goals in 2020 is to start trying out some of these other platforms, because they do. I know.
Sacrilege.
Leaving GarageBand. So I've got the ability. My channel's not called the GarageBand something, so I've got the ability to use other things. Sorry.
Keep an eye out for the Ableton Live guide coming soon, guys.
All about FL Studio these days, isn't it, Patrick?
Yeah.
I must say, and I meant to say at the start though, if you're not a garage, well, okay, I was about to say if you're not a GarageBand user, well, why are you watching this stream? But for those that I know that there's literally people that watch my channel and watch your channel that don't actually use GarageBand, and I think that's testament to some of the cool videos you do. I don't know, but no, you do your Wish videos. If I didn't use GarageBand, I would still watch your Wish videos, because your Wish microphone, your Wish, like buying cheap, crappy gear on Wish and then reviewing it. I've actually been quite surprised by some of the quality of some of that.
Yeah, the recent one I had, I was amazed. It was the condenser mic. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, that was actually usable. I was amazed. But yeah, those are great fun to make. It's really good fun, kind of making fun of crap that you buy.
And if you're a big Wish fan, let us know, because if you buy all the stuff on Wish, then yeah, you're probably a very frustrated human, because you're probably spending half your time with broken gear and the other half feeling bad about your poor decision making. But anyway, we will move on. I want to give a big shout out to Bubba, who has thrown a super chat on here for $20. So thank you so much, Bubba. Thanks for what you do. Well, thanks for what you do, because I think you alluded to it at the start as you reached your 50,000 subscriber mark, but we actually can't do this. If it was just us talking to each other, we'd probably still do it, because we're narcissists and we like the sound of our own voice. But if it wasn't for you actually listening and engaging and interacting with what we put out and the content and giving us your questions, it's actually what drives a lot of what we do. And as you mentioned before, I think probably 70 to 80% of my videos are based on questions directly that I get from actual viewers on the channel. So I'm sure that you find the same sort of thing with viewers as well, that a lot of the ideas and a lot of the videos come out of your comments, your questions, and your suggestions.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, of course, I mean, answer the questions that people are asking. Absolutely. Definitely.
Beautiful. And Jade has also confirmed here that Auria Pro has time stretch and pitch stretch, and EG Pulse does also. So there you go. We have a bunch of things. We have a bunch of things that we can do there. I'll continue on. I'll make sure my phone's gone to sleep. So let's see if we have another one. Now, this is an interesting one. This comes from Marapur. It says, Pete, when I open up the instrument, the velocity thing doesn't show up on my classical grand. And this is what we were chatting about just beforehand, which I didn't know until maybe a month ago, and it sounds like you weren't aware of either, which is that on iPad, if you're using the touch screen for your keyboard, it doesn't have velocity sensitivity on your piano, on your keyboard instruments. It does on drums, which is super weird. But when you go to your keyboard, there's a velocity slider that you can slide up and down. So you basically need to be sliding with one hand while playing with the other if you want velocity sensitivity, which is pretty weird. And I don't really know why, and I don't really know a workaround for it yet. So
is it like a 3D touch thing, maybe? Like, I know older iPhones had like a 3D touch element to it, which I don't know if they do anymore. I know iPads don't, as far as I'm aware. Is there something like
it could be, and I thought that as well, but then I was looking at the specs, and and again, other folks may be able to help us, but I think the newer iPhone 11s, which don't have 3D touch anymore, they still have velocity sensitivity. So it must be something built in. I don't know the answer. So there you go. We don't know everything. So this is why we ask you. It's why we do a live show. We're like, we're gonna learn probably as much as you will. But yeah, if you do know more about this situation, then let us know, because we always want to learn. And yes, it's something that's a little bit weird. But I guess the ultimate solution there is to use a MIDI keyboard. So I know that if you are getting serious and you're a keyboard player and you want to get some good piano sounds, you want to play some synth sounds, you want to use some of the built-in instruments, a MIDI keyboard is probably a good investment, because you're going to get things like real touch sensitivity, aftertouch, modulation, pitch bends, sustain. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of reasons, and MIDI keyboards are ridiculously good and quite inexpensive these days for what you get. So I would recommend that path as well. I will see. Do we have any more questions here live? If you're seeing ones that I'm missing, Patrick, then give me a shout. The chat.
Yeah, this is what I'm doing here. I have my iPad here. That's why I'm looking down all the time. I'm
I know.
Googling the answers to all these questions.
You've just you're like the Wizard of Oz. That's a little man in the machine is telling you that.
Shazam, the iPad producer, says that's not true. It exports as a multi-track. Elaborate, because I'd be interested to know a bit more about that. Definitely.
Okay.
As far as I was aware, it didn't. So if I'm wrong, then yeah, tell me definitely.
Great, yeah. Oh, and if we're wrong and it's better than what we say, then that's good. And that's the thing. I don't think Patrick and I have egos that are so big that if we're wrong, we'll say, "Well, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure it was definitely used to be like that yesterday when I tried it." No, we can be wrong, and we're happy to be wrong, especially if it means that
frequently wrong.
I think you have to be wrong. If you're not wrong, it means you're not trying things right. That's the way I look at it. If you're always right, or if you're always spot on, it means you're not taking any risks. And
let me write that down. That's great.
Yeah. I'm going to make like a bunch of T-shirts afterwards. They're going to be these like 14-line quotes. I'm like, Patrick said he'd buy one. All right. Now, I think this is my last question here, and then we'll make sure that we mop up any questions that are here live. And I've got a couple of special questions I've got just for Patrick. So if you're thinking we're going to peter out here at the end, no, the tough questions are coming right at the end because they're my questions for Patrick. So this is thanks for this, Pete. That sounds balmy. I love the word balmy, just quietly. Sounds balmy, but suggestions for recording guitar feedback. So the good thing is that we've got, you always want to reduce feedback generally, but the old days of plugging into your amp and cranking it up and then finding that right position and then recording that nice bit of crunch like Alice in Chains and Nirvana did way back in the day. But now that we've got all these clean interfaces and clean sounds, where do we get our feedback from? You got any thoughts or suggestions for feedback on guitar?
You get your big amplifier, you stick a microphone in front of it, and then turn it up really loud, and that's the best way to do it. There's not really a great way to do it in the box, I don't think. It isn't going to sound dreadful. So yeah, get a big amplifier, stick a mic in front of it, and do it the old-fashioned way. Sometimes that's just the way to do it, really.
Yeah.
That makes me sound really old, doesn't it? Oh.
I know. I'm trying to think clever because I'm like, I always like to think that there's a way to do something differently or in the box, or if you don't have the gear, and how would you actually do it? I'm struggling a bit too. There are some amps, so you can experiment with some amp sims. Problem is that, in my experience, when you turn the gain up too much on an amp sim, the sort of distortion you get is not that nice.
Clipping, isn't it? Yeah.
It's clipping, yeah. It's hard clipping as opposed to soft clipping. So you can play around with some distortion plugins. You can play around with some of the amp sims and try and just drive them a little bit harder. Sometimes you can get some weird, wacky effects just with the chord on your guitar and with the position and with the pickups, and even through an interface, you're going to get those coming through. But yeah, I agree. Sometimes you just need to, and just get yourself the thing is, a little amplifier can actually work really well. So you don't have to go out and buy yourself a giant stack. You've got one hanging above you. There you go.
Brilliant. 40 quid. Fantastic for feedback.
Exactly. So yes, you do not need to buy a very small, and that's the thing. You're not playing live. You can put an SM57 in front of a little amp, crank it up, and it can sound like a big stack. And you don't need to spend the time and the money and the effort. And if you live, in the real world like us, and you don't have unlimited storage space, I don't know about you, but I can't really put a quad box and a giant head in my studio. And if you're in a cupboard, probably not going to fit there either.
No. My wife wouldn't appreciate it either, I don't think so. Yeah. Best not to do that.
All righty. Let us. I don't think we have any other questions that have come. Oh, yes, we do. We've got a query here. We've got a fun question. I like fun questions. So this is from Naki Zakala. Fun question for you guys. Do you think home theaters reproduce music from a stereo section when running 5.1 or 7.1? Does this somehow change something or invoke some ideas? So yeah, it's interesting.
Don't throw that to me, Pete. That's fine. You just
right over to you.
No idea.
No, I don't have any idea either. But it's an interesting one that I'll rant on this because 5.1, 7.1 home theater sound. So there's people that are paid a lot more money and have a lot more experience than us that actually mix for 5.1 and 7.1 channel. It gives me a headache just thinking about it. I find it hard enough to work out where my tracks go between left and right. So having front left, front right, center, rear left, rear right, and sub, and having to do that, or 7.1, which is 2 additional channels, and deciding where everything goes in that spectrum just actually hurts my head to think about. So in terms of how that works, I think the problem with home theater systems and playing back music, it's good to, we'll talk about referencing mixes. So it is good to take your music and play it through your home theater, because what a lot of home theater systems do is if you play a stereo file, the way they're set up is they kind of crunch everything down to the middle center speaker, because that's sort of the way 5.1 works, is it wants the main sound to be there. Some will be smart enough to push it to left and right and put your left and right speakers and give you good sound. But either way, it's a good idea to actually go and reference your music on a different platform, see what it sounds like, because you may be EQing it on your headphones or on your monitor speakers in your studio, but if you go play it in the car, you go play it on your Bluetooth speaker, you go play it on your home theater, on these different speakers and different environments, you'll hear different things. And it doesn't mean you have to then change everything, but it means you can come and tweak a few settings and make it sound the best it can across all platforms. It's never going to be perfect on everything, but if something's really sticking out on a particular device, then you can come back and change it. That would be my random rant on that.
Sounds good.
You did say don't throw that to me, so I won't. We won't go on there. Yes, and Bubba says makes me think about my old quadraphonic vinyl. Yeah, the first record player. You don't call them record players anymore. You call them vinyl, because vinyl's cool and records sound naff and old. But yeah, my dad's first record player had quadraphonic sound. I think there was like about 10 records made in quadraphonic sound, and then they realized no one cared about quadraphonic sound. So I think 5.1 audio went the same route as that, which is like stereo's good enough and practical. And in fact, now majority of people are probably listening in mono. They're probably listening on their phone or on a Bluetooth speaker, which is summing everything down to mono. So we not only have we not gone to 5 or 7 channels, we've gone back to 1. So go figure. Hello, Lewin is here. Hello to you. What's up, boys? What's up, Lewin? GarageBand and beyond, one of the OG GarageBand crews. So yes, if you aren't subscribed to Lewin's channel, do that. GarageBand and beyond. It's very, very cool. I'm going to go into my last couple of questions here, because we are coming up to the end of the hour, which is the end. Yeah, get ready, prepare for this one. We're up to nearly the end of the hour. This is where the really tricky curly questions come in. So these are my questions, sort of curated from the last 12 months of different questions I get related to GarageBand and using GarageBand, and with GarageBand guide guru Patrick here, who's very humble and is already going to feel bad about me saying that. I'm going to ask these questions. What is the first thing that people should do when they're starting a new project? They're starting out with GarageBand. So you're brand new, you open it up and you're staring at that blank screen for the first time. Where do you suggest people go? What's the best way to get yourself familiar and actually start making music?
Have a song. I would say I've started so many projects in GarageBand because I've been planning to write in the program, and it's not always ever really a good thing to do. At least have some form of song ready to go, so you can roughly record it, and then you can start to build on it from there. I would always have like a rough guitar track. I'm a guitar guy. You would always have a rough guitar track. Record all that, obviously, to a drummer track or a click track if you want to do that, and then build on it from there. I would very much not recommend, if you're anything like me anyway, to dive in without any kind of song idea first, because you'll come up with a good melody and then you'll maybe stop and then open another project and then have another melody and then stop, and then your desktop is full of unfinished projects that you will never go back to. So yeah, I would say have some form of purpose going in the form of a song ready to record. Yeah,
no, I like that. And especially I think, and probably because both of us are sort of singer-songwriters, rock-type musicians, band-based musicians from back in the day, I think that's really good advice for folks like us starting out, because there's nothing worse, and I know that I've been guilty of this, is you sit there and like you say, you've got an idea, and all you end up with is 50 projects, none of them finished, all of them with little ideas. One's a hook and one's a melody and one's a chord progression, and that's about it. So that is good advice. I think for other types of music producers, playing around with loops can be kind of fun. So if you are literally new and maybe you're not as proficient with music, so you're like, I don't know how to write a song, then the live loops are pretty cool, and using Apple loops and just putting things together. I know, especially for kids and for younger folks getting into it, if you don't have a musical background or you've never written a song before, you can start out with that. I know people look down on loops and they're like, oh, you're not going to produce a song with just loops. And no, you're not. But what you can do is you can start with loops and then you can add it. So never just say, oh, I'm just going to record loops, or I'm just going to use loops. But loops is a great place to start to then add in your originality, because rather than having to start with a complete blank canvas, which can be daunting to some people, grab a drum loop and then go, hey, this is a funky beat. And then you can play with the virtual instruments and add a melody line, and then you can do that. So I think, as we said before, no right or wrong, depends on who you are, where you are. But yeah, definitely avoid those, exactly what you said, those part projects, because you can spend your whole life noodling around and never actually get anything finished. And it's only by finishing and sharing and getting feedback that I think you're going to get good advice and make music better.
Loon's just put in the chat there, just get used to how the program works. And it's absolutely right. You can probably sit and watch a million videos or read a million manuals about how this thing works, but until you kind of get used to using it yourself, practicing, I guess, creating stuff on it, you're not going to get good at it. To try to get that balance right between kind of learning stuff and consuming all of this content and then actually doing it, you need to get that balance right and make sure you're actually practicing what you're learning as well. Otherwise, you're not going to get very far either, you know.
Agreed. Love it. No, that is perfect. I'll jump back to another question here before I give my really hard ones right here at the end for Patrick.
That was a hard one. Come on.
I'm sorry. From Amaracia, what's a good way for a true introvert to collab on a project, especially without the ability to pay or promise any form of monetary results? So this is a really interesting one. So I don't know about you, Patrick, but I'm a card-carrying member of the Introvert Club, which means that I'm definitely can appreciate this. And in my experience, the internet is amazing for this sort of thing, because you don't have to be on a live video like Patrick and I are right now talking about this sort of thing. You can do everything via groups, Facebook groups. Reddit is good for finding folks to collaborate with. Just any forum that you can find, and just find people's music that you like, and then give them a shout out and say, hey, I really like your music. Would you like to collaborate on something with me? Or put something out there and say, hey guys, I've got this half an idea. Does anyone want to add something to this? You'll be absolutely astonished how many people who are other card carrying introverts will actually respond to that and say, yes, I want to play in a band. I want to play music with other people, but I don't like the public, and I don't like going out there and being out there. How can I do this? And then you use all of Patrick's and Lewin's and my tips to collaborate, to zip up your projects, to send them over Dropbox, to do all the things. And then, yeah, you can create some cool music. And I've done this a bunch of times with other folks over time. So yeah, that would be my advice. Do you have any advice for Amaracia on this one?
Much the same, really. I mean, everybody's their own worst critic. I absolutely would put myself in the introvert camp as well. And putting yourself out there sometimes is just, you're right, it's quite daunting. I think the important thing is that you recognize that you probably should do it anyway. Even if you do kind of feel kind of a bit scared or like get a weird kind of, imposter syndrome creeping up on you, just put one foot in front of the other and do it. Once you do it the first time, once you've broken that kind of seal, you'll be set to go. And yeah, like you say, you'll be amazed the amount of people that I speak to doing this, who do similar things online, who have websites and YouTube channels. They're exactly the same. It seems bizarre because you're sitting in front of a camera or recording a video or releasing stuff out into the world. But yeah, a lot of people are the same way. Just do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it comes down to your comfort zone, and the more you try it, the more comfortable you are. So if you want to have a laugh, go to my channel and you can do this to Patrick too, but I wouldn't be so mean as to say that. But go to date order and go old first, and then see the very first videos that I put out on YouTube, and then feel really good about yourself, because you're going to see some pretty ordinary production.
I do that all the time. Don't give away these secrets, man. It's great. I do that all the time for like channels that you watch religiously. The fantastic production value. Tech review channels I find are a great one to do, with excellent production values and amazing presenting technique. Go back to their first video. Do you ever watch Unbox Therapy? They've got about 50. Yeah, go back to his first videos, and yeah, you're right. You do kind of feel a bit better about yourself, definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody's got to start somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. If you can't feel good about yourself, then feel good about how other people were bad to begin with. That's it. Lesson to learn it.
Terrible advice.
All right. How bad is that advice? No, it is true, and you do, like, it does get easier and it does get better. So yeah, like for me, if you spoke to me 10 years ago and you said to me, Pete, you will have a YouTube channel and you will present to camera and you'll do live videos and you'll talk to random strangers on the internet all the time, I would say you are absolutely crazy. But the thing is, I did it the first time and it wasn't that bad. And then I did it the second time and it was actually kind of fun. And then I did it the third and fourth and fifth and sixth time, and it gets better every time. So your comfort zone might start like that. You may be in your little introvert bubble, but every time you do something different, it expands out. So don't go boom, don't go, I'm starting my live show tomorrow, but put out a video or reach out to someone via email or ask a question to someone in a forum and collaborate. So yeah, slowly, but yeah, there's options that you can use there. Now, we're rapidly approaching the end of the show, and I know that other questions are coming in, so I apologize if we miss stuff. If we do, then please throw it in the comments of this video, and Patrick and I will come back and answer anything, we promise, because we know we're going to miss a bunch of stuff here. But a couple of final questions that I wanted to throw out here, because these are things I'm interested in for you. So using GarageBand is cool. What's the first bit of gear that you would have? I know we haven't talked about gear much because honestly, as you said, good song, good recording techniques, good ability to hear it and mix it well is much more important than the actual gear you use. But if someone was buying their first bit of gear, they've got just a Mac or they've got just an iPad and they want to use their first bit of gear to improve the quality, what would you say to go for?
Again, it depends, I guess, on what your budget is and what you're going to be doing, what you're going for. I can tell you what my first bit of gear was. I had a MacBook Air, or I had iBook G4 was the very first one. Monster of a thing. The first thing I got was a USB microphone, a USB condenser microphone, the Samson C01U. I recorded a whole EP with just that microphone. Singing into it, I stuck it in front of an amplifier for recording guitar. It was just in the box drums and bass. And it kind of worked. It did the job. I was able to kind of create tracks and release tracks just using it. So whatever you I would say probably go for that. It depends on what kind of music you're making as well. Obviously, if you're a hip hop guy or an EDM guy, you're not going to want a microphone of any kind. You might want some kind of control surface. Or if you're, I don't know if you would be like kind of classically minded, you might want some form of MIDI piano setup or something like that. So I kind of depends, really, to be honest, is the disappointing and vague answer to that question, Pete.
Oh, it's a great answer.
Sorry,
and it's the right answer. No, it's 100% the right answer, because again, you will go to some folks that are like say you cannot record a single note until you have a USB audio interface, connect a microphone and a MIDI keyboard and a pair of monitor speakers and spend $1,000, and you're like, oh, okay, maybe I don't want to do this music recording thing. But the thing is, start with what you got. Do the best with what you've got, and then slowly upgrade over time. Like, yes, you need to stop somewhere. Otherwise, you're like me and you own 5 USB interfaces and you don't really remember why.
You just bought a new one, didn't you?
I did. By the way, I'm having a sale soon. Anyone here in Australia, overseas, but anyone in Australia that wants to buy some quality secondhand gear, because
sign it. You'll make a fortune, Pete.
Oh yeah, that's right. People just be like, I would buy it, but it's got your name written all over it anymore. All right, so yes, I agree with that. Yes, it is horses for courses, so to speak. Final question here, and this is something that I've always wanted to know. You've been doing this stuff for like a decade or maybe more now. What over that time is the question that you have been asked more than any about GarageBand?
Well, apart from how do you install GarageBand on Android?
Or a PC.
I don't know. I mean, a lot of the questions I get from complete beginners who maybe don't even have a machine yet is, we touched on this in at the top of the show. What should I get? A Mac or an iPad? What should machine should I buy to create music on? Is one I get quite often. I'm trying to think what else. What's the best way to start? Nothing really like massively interesting. It's the questions you get asked the most tend to be, I don't mean to say the most obvious ones in a kind of derogatory way, but are the kind of the simplest ones, like how do I get started? Where is this button? How do I record this thing? Why won't my interface work? All kind of questions like that. There's not really one big one that really jumps out at me as being an all-encompassing question, apart from how do I install GarageBand on Android?
How do you install GarageBand on Android or PC, by the way? I've always wanted to know that.
Testing, Pete. You know the answer to that question.
It's late at night for Patrick. I won't push him any further, but yes, you can't is the short answer to that. Or check out my video about how you can install a GarageBand on Android or PC, because I answer it pretty quickly, and you can't. And then people have come in and said, well, actually, you can install it machine on it. Blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, fine, continue on. No, that is 100% true. And for those interested in me, yeah, same sort of deal. In terms of GarageBand, the weird it's a lot of those little fiddly ones where it's like I can't find this button, or I'm pressing on this and automation isn't showing up, and I'll say you just have to tap a little further to the left, and then, thank you, it's great. So yeah, there's not much there. Probably connecting things. I think iOS, because they don't have a USB port, the whole USB thing, and I've probably done more videos on that because I get more questions on that than anything. So I think folks don't really realize, and they'll go to eBay and they'll buy the $3 version, and then they'll plug in their MIDI keyboard and it won't work, and then they'll not know why. So yeah,
highlight the fact that Apple really don't do a very good job of making manuals, although there is manuals in place for the Mac and the iOS and iPadOS versions of GarageBand. They kind of show you where things are, but not necessarily how to make things work, if you know what I mean. Which is a good thing because it kind of keeps you and me in business. But yeah, there's not really, their support section is lacking slightly when it comes to instruction manuals for how to use these things. Very true. Agree. I'm not complaining. No, well, exactly right. A lot of people say that. They're just like, oh, Apple should hire you to write all their stuff. And I'm like, no, thanks. Have you seen some of the things I say about them sometimes? I don't think they'd be particularly happy because I don't agree with every business decision that they make. And if I was on their payroll, I'd have to be Mr. Corporate guy saying, yeah, $65 for a piece of plastic is a great deal. Anyway, we're out of time. We're over time here. So already? I know that flew by, didn't it? That was and nearly an hour's worth, and I wanted to give people back to their weekend because GarageBand is amazing. We could talk about it for probably another 4 hours and continue answering questions. If we did miss your questions, please put them in the comments. If you found this enjoyable and you got some value out of it, you can hit the like button. That always helps us out. That tells us we should do more. If you want Patrick and I to come back and do another version of this in the future, up for that, definitely. We'll definitely get onto that. So yeah, please let us know because hopefully our goal is more questions next time. Exactly, more questions in advance because we got a few questions in advance, and then we got a bunch of questions here now. So in the last 5 minutes, when we're run out of time, we can't answer all the questions we're getting. So apologies to those. Repost them, put them in the comments. So actually go back and put them in the comments. We'll come back and respond to them, and then magically new videos will appear on our channels, which will answer those questions because we got no new ideas. We take all our ideas from you. You're doing all that. Any parting words from you, Patrick, before we finish off here today? No, thanks very much for joining us. I would like to shout out specifically to Mr. Tom. I don't know if I can pronounce your last name, Tom Calhoun? Yes, something like that. You're a top guy. You've been a massive supporter of mine for ages, and it is really good to see you in the chat, mate. Thank you for your support, and everybody for joining us tonight as well. I really appreciate it. Absolutely. We've had a bunch of folks here. We've had Bubba, Amaracia, Derek Smith, Sam, Eric, Gary, Tom, as you mentioned, GarageBand and Beyond, Mr. Lewin Barringer over there, Jade Star, and a whole bunch of people. Niki Zakala added some great questions here. So, yes, thank you to everyone. We know we missed everyone. The problem with saying some people's names is that you're going to miss about half the other people's names. So, half of the people are happy and the other half think we're horrible now. Anyway, that is going to do it for this one. Once again, there's links down where you can subscribe to Patrick's channel, to the GarageBand Guy, which I highly suggest you do, down in the description below. You can obviously subscribe to my channel right here on Studio Live today. Hit the like button if you got some value out of this. Let us know your comments and feedback in the comments section and any other questions that we missed, and we'll answer those. And we'll see you around the channels really soon. Cheers, folks. Bye, guys.